Hello friends, my name is Sarang and in this video we will look how we can use the OpenAPI generator to generate the server boilerplate code in a Spring Boot. Okay, so we will create or we will generate two types of code. One is reactive and another one is non-reactive. So the reactive code would be generated using the OpenAPI generator. For that we will need the Spring Web dependency, and when we are generating the reactive code using OpenAPI generator, we will add the dependency of Spring WebFlux. Okay, so the first what you do is go to this Spring initializer and add these two dependencies and download the project and open into your IDE. Okay, so I'm using IntelliJ here. So before we use the OpenAPI generator, we need to write or design the API in a OpenAPI standard. So for that, if you're not aware about the OpenAPI specification, I would recommend you to go to this website and learn about the OpenAPI specification and how to design the API and how to write the API definitions. Okay, so this website gives a basic structure where it says that we have to write the OpenAPI definitions in YAML or JSON. Okay, so go to this website and look how we can do the API first approach. Okay, so the process that we're gonna follow is the API first approach. So what does that mean is first we will design the API and write its definition, and then we will do the implementation of that APIs. Okay, first designing and then the implementation. So while doing the implementation, we will use the Open API generator to generate the boilerplate code, and then we will write the business logic. Okay, so all that process is called API first approach. So I would recommend you to go to this website also and just look into what is API first approach. It has been used widely nowadays for designing or building the microservices, and it has been adopted widely. So let's get started. So let's first design the API. For that, I will go to the resources folder and we will create a directory with the name Swagger. And now I'm gonna create a file with the name api.yaml. So here I will write the API definitions of our API. It's gonna be two APIs. One is guest, one is post, and another one is get. So let's get started with that. So I'm gonna write the Open API definition. Version would be 3.0.1. I will just give the info about this API. The title would be, let's say, user, and the version of this API would be 1. Okay, and I will give the description as user resources. Okay, and here I will just write the server details, and it would be an array. It could take more than one server details. So here I will write localhost 8080, and this would be the local server. So I will just write the description as local server. Okay, so now I will add the paths, and the first path would be a slash user. So it would be when we are calling, we have to use this the URL, and then at the end we have to write slash user. And this would be a post API. Okay, and the I will add the summary as save user. Okay, it's crucial to add the description and summary because we will also render the Swagger UI, and the Swagger will take this particular file and create the UI for us. So make sure to add all the description and the summary. Okay, and we will write now the operation ID. This will be used by the OpenAPI generator, so I will explain you why it's needed later. And then we will write the request body of how the request will look like for this particular API. So this would be of the content would be of application JSON, and the schema of this particular request will be referred from the component sections. Okay, so we will create this component section here. So first let me write the model will be of type user DTO. Okay, so let me go to this components schemas, and here I will write user DTO. Okay, so again I will write the type would be object, and the description is always necessary because many developers is going to use this file. So it's better to write the descriptions for your APIs. And now I will write the properties of this particular object. It will have ID and the type would be string and the format would be UUID. Okay, and I will write email. The type again would be string, and then I will write first name. The type would be string, and I will add the validations here. The minimum length of the first name should be 3, and the max length should be 10. Okay, and I will write about the last name, and this would be of type string. So I've also added the validation here. Okay, so this the request body will refer to this particular model as we have written over here in the ref. Okay, so now let's add the response. So what the API response will look like for this particular API. So this would go under the responses section. Okay, so this would give a 200 uh, 200 response, and the description of it, it's okay, and the response will look like the same as the request. Okay, okay, in the request I'm going to send the user DTO. In the response, again I will send the user DTO. So you can send whatever you want. Okay, for this demo I'm using this both in the request and response. Okay, so our API design, it looks fine. So we will use this file to generate the server code. That would be our controllers, and we'll also that will also create the user DTO model. Okay, so for that we have to add the OpenAPI Maven plugin here. So that takes the input as the api.yaml file, the file that we have just created, and we had that API definitions in there. And this is the name of the plugin, and we will use the generator name as Spring because OpenAPI generator has so many generator name. Since we are developing the Spring Boot app, so we need to have this as a generator name, and the packages where the boilerplate code will be generated. All this packages name that we have given, and we'll use the delegate pattern over here. So let's look into that. So first, what we're gonna do is we're gonna generate the code. Okay, so let me remove all these things first. So for that, we'll use the install command and the build got succeed. Now if you look into the target folder, go to the generator resources, and here open this particular DTO. So under the DTO, we got user DTO. Okay, so I think this is a bit old. Let me clean and then install. Okay, so now you would see in the DTO we have only DTO because uh, inside this particular definition file we have one model with the name user DTO, and that's been auto-generated by the OpenAPI generator. So all the properties and all the boilerplate has been created by the OpenAPI, and it has also added the valid annotation that would be used while for validating specific fields. So for an example, in the first name I've added the minimum and the max length that would come over here. So everything is being generated by this generator. Okay, so here this particular code is generated as a non-reactive code. So we will look into the controller as well. So this is also generated, and we will go into this user API delegate since we have used the delegate pattern. So it gives the response entity and the of type user DTO. Since we are returning the user DTO in the response, so it will give the same in this API. And the save user we have written over here as operation ID, if you can recall. So the OpenAPI generator will use this operation ID to to write this particular method. So operation ID is your method name for that particular API, and it says that it will take user DTO to request and user DTO as a response, that whatever you have written in the API YAML, it will generate. Okay, so now we have generated the code. So let's do one thing. Let's start the application. Okay, but first let me show you the dependencies. So we have generated the non-reactive code. For that we need the starter web dependency, and this particular open API spring.ui is for rendering the Swagger UI, and this two dependencies required by the open API generator. Make sure to add this two. Okay, and the Spring Boot starter validation is required for adding the validation. So since you can see the generated code has validations in place, it's because the generator had found this particular dependency in the class path and added all the validations for us. Okay, make sure to add this particular dependency. So let's do one thing. Let's start the application. Okay, and the application has been started. Let's see whether we get the Swagger UI or not. We'll go to the local host 8080 Swagger UI.html. Okay, we got the Swagger UI, and in there we have an API called save user of type post. Let's try this out. So it shows that this would be the request body. Okay, so let me do one thing. Uh, Let me add this as one of the field as required. Okay, email is the field that is required all the time. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna restart the application. Okay, and now I'll again refresh it. Okay, now you can see in the user DTO model uh, all the fields that you can see over here has been put in over here, and here what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try calling the API. I don't require the ID first because we are generating the user, so ID would be created by the server. Now what I'm gonna do is not gonna send the email since it's required, but I'm not gonna send it. So we got a response saying that 501. Okay, so one thing I have done wrong here is I have written required, but then I have to again regenerate the code for it. Then only the Open API will add the validation on email. Okay, that's a mistake from my side. So again, I will write start the server and then again re-render the UI, and I'll just remove the ID now. Okay, ID and email both. Now I'll get the error saying that email was required. So as you can see, I gave a response as a bad request, and when we see the logs, it shows that the email was required and it has been not supplied by the user. Okay, so if we want to send the actual request, we have to add the email here. Email, for example, string. Okay, and it's give us the again bad request. Let's see why, because I have not added comma here. Okay, now it gives 501. So why it gives the 501 is because if you just go to the boilerplate code here, inside this delegate class, they have implemented the save user method, and it says that it is not been implemented by the user. So it gives the default response saying that 501. So what we have to do is we have to implement this particular interface. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create one directory or package saying that delegate, and I will add one file, okay, saying that user delegate impl, okay, which implements the user API delegates, okay, and this would be service. We don't require to create the bean, it will be created. And now I will just go to the generates. Okay, it has not given me. Let me go to the override methods. See, we have to implement this save user method. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is let's implement this particular save user method now. So for that, what I'm gonna do is now we'll not get 501 since we have implemented the save user method. Okay, so in that we'll write the business logic. So we'll go to this service and I will create one service with the name called user service. Okay, and I'll write service here. And first I'll create a mock DB here as a map. I'll write UID and user DTO. So I'll just write DB and I'll write concurrent map. Oh, so it has created. No, I don't want to implement anything. So I'll remove this thing. Okay, I'll just write hash map. Okay, so here I will write public user DTO save user. So I'll get a user DTO. And what I'm going to do is first I will generate the UUID and save it into this DB variable. So UID dot random, and first we will use the user DTO that we got and set the ID, and that would be this UID, and then we will write db dot put UID and this user DTO, and then return back the user DTO. Okay, then we have to write or in get this particular user service in the delegate IMPL. Okay, so let's create a constructor. Go here. Okay, and here I'm gonna return the response. We'll use the method that was used in the, wait just a second, response entity dot okay user service dot save user DTO. Okay, so now if I just start the server, and now if I go to the Swagger, okay, now we should get 200. Okay, so let's execute this. So we got the response back with the ID. So in the request we have not supplied the ID, but the server has given the ID in the response. Okay, so that's fine. Now let's create one get API. Okay, for that again we have to go to this api.yaml file, and okay, just let's start writing the design of the API. Okay, so this particular API would uh, get the ID from the user for the and this will be a get API, and we will write summary get user by, let's say, by ID. Okay, and we will write the operation ID as get user by ID, and we'll write the parameters because we're gonna supply the ID in the request in the path, so we would need that ID to find the user, and it will be in the path, and it is required, so we'll write true. And how this ID would be, so we have to write under the schema, this will be of type string, and the format will be again here UID, and also give the description of what this UID is. So this UUID is nothing but the unique ID of an user. Okay, so this looks fine, and we again have to write the response of this API. The response would be same as the post, that will get the user DTO based on the ID that the user has given us. Okay, so we got the API design in place. So what we need to do is we need to generate the server code for this particular API. So again, write the command to generate the boilerplate code. Now if you can go to the user API delegate Now there are two methods. One is get user by ID that we have created, and there is also a you save user. Okay, since now it's not implemented, so it will give 501. So we have to go to this particular user service and create this particular method user DTO get user by ID. We will get ID in type UUID. So we will return optional. Either there can be an user or there won't be any user, right? So based on the ID we have to find. So we will write db dot get ID. If there is no user, we will throw exception. Uh, Sorry, so this would be new user not found exception. So we will write user not found for ID, and we'll supply the ID over here. Okay, now for this we will create a class, okay, under exception folder. So as you can see, one package has been created exception, and this would extend the runtime exception. And here I have to write super. Here I have to write the string. Okay, so now let's go here and finish this particular API implementation. Let's go to here and let's write. Oh, first we have to override the method. So I'll go to this IMPL and then write override method get user by ID. And now we will write the response that would be of response entity. Okay, and this would be user service dot get the user by ID, and there you go. So here you have implemented one more API get user by ID. So let's go and start the server, go to your Swagger UI, and now let me first write one user into the database. Okay, so I'll write execute. So we got one ID, and we will use this ID for fetching the user back. Okay, just a second, I'll just copy this and we'll go to this particular Swagger for this particular API. I'll write control V and then we'll see we got the user back. Okay, we got the user information back. So if I supply the wrong UUID, then we got the 500 internal server error, right? And it has given the error in this particular format. So we want the error to be in the format that we define. So what we have to do is I'll create one model with the name error. So I will again ask the OpenAPI generator to generate one model for me. Okay, so I will here write error and I will write the type as object and then properties that would have code of type integer, and the format would be 32-bit. Okay, and now message would be of type string. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and generate this model with the help of this command. The OpenAPI generator will create the model for me with the name error. So if you can go here, so it has created one class for me with the name error. Okay, so now we know that we will get this particular exception 500 internal server error when we are not giving the right user ID. So what we're gonna do is we'll create one file the package with the name config, and we will create one file with the name exception translator. Okay, which has annotation called controller advice, and this would have one exception handler which would handle the user not found exception. And I will write here public response entity is will be of type error, and I will write handler user not found exception. And all right, you might be familiar with this controller advice that when the application sees this exception, it would come under this particular method and translate the exception. Okay, so first I will also write one method that will generate the error in a format that we need. So that this would need one message and code. So I will quickly write that method. So the error dot set. Okay, we have added the wrong error class. So let me first go and remove this. Sorry, error would be of the one that we have generated, not the default error class. Okay, error dot set code b of core error dot set message b of message, and then we'll return the error. Okay, so what we just have to do is return response entity dot okay. We will get generate the error with the e dot get message, and we will also write the code as not found, not found value. Okay, so let's again start the server, and so let's get back to the Swagger and let's see whether we get the response in a way that we have defined in the controller device. So here we have mentioned here when the user not found exception is thrown, we'll get into this method and we will return the error in this format which has a code and message. So let me go ahead and create one user. Okay, I'll create a user with the name devproblems gmail.com. Okay, and then I will just write the first name and the last name. I'll execute. I'll get the user back in the post API call with the ID. Now I'm gonna give this ID to the get API. I'll click on this, and now I'll change the last letter to from F to A. Now I'll get a response in a format that I've defined code and message. Earlier it was giving a Spring default error. Now it's giving the one that we have defined in the controller device. So let me correct the UUID. It has given the right response with the user details. Hope so you understood the process. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna generate the non the reactive code. So that what we have to do is first let me remove all the tabs and let's go to this form.xml and just add the dependency as WebFlux. Okay, the open API UI should be also WebFlux. Okay, so as I told you that we're gonna see generating reactive and non-reactive code, the boilerplate code. So now we will create the reactive or generate the reactive code using this OpenAPI generated. So if you can recall that in the API delegate there was response entity, there is no mono of response entity. So now we will create that particular reactive thing. So for that, go to this particular plugin and write reactive as true. Okay, so this all non-reactive code will give a error. So let me delete this files. Let's delete all the files not required. Okay, so we will just reload this dependencies. Okay, now let's generate the reactive code. Okay, so that I've just added WebFlux and this OpenAPI WebFlux and added that reactive as true. So now if you can go to the delegate, now you can see the mono of response entity. Okay, it was just, adding that reactive true and adding all the dependencies for the reactive code. Now we got the mono. Now you can write your APIs in a reactive way. So I think that's it. So okay, but let me also render the Swagger Swagger UI for this. So I'll just reload. I'll write HTTP localhost. Okay, now this is Swagger for your um, reactive code. It's same only, but for that we just added a different dependencies saying that the Open API UI would be of types WebFlux that is needed. Okay, thank you and hope you like the video and subscribe to the channel and have a great day.